Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the 76. Again, we're here, Mike and I, ready to tackle more of the nation's problems. And today we're going to start with the or focus on the LA riots. And you know, I guess the bigger issue is the ICE raids and mass migrations, the illegal immigrant population in this country, and what it really means for you know, what we're doing going forward, and how we want to handle it. You know, obviously there's a lot of at least the appearance of disagreement and difference of opinion, and you know, clearly a chaotic and challenging time in the country's history. So, you know, Mike, if you want to go ahead and kind of
Sure.
jump in,
Yeah.
take the reins on what you think is driving this,
Mhm.
and what you
Yeah.
see.
Well, I think Trump he's making a point. I see it as largely from political theater. I don't think it's like on both sides. I think they're amping up the magnitude of this. Like if you turn in the news, you think L.A. is burning down. I think it's like a 3 or 4 square block area where there is some protest and disorder, going on. People, uh, so there your needs, that needs to be addressed. But I definitely don't think like sending in the Marines is way overblown. Um, I think the fact that they're bringing like these are people that are showing up to have due process for their claims. These aren't people who are outlaws. These are people who are they have followed the process. They're showing up to participate in their asylum process or their immigration process, and then they're being,
The
from what I
people at the
understand.
riots.
Well, no, we're talking about like so the source of this started like I think from my understanding, my limit, and I haven't
We're
definitely
going back to the ICE raid. Okay, okay.
like that people are showing up to this federal building for their immigration process and they're being detained. They're like being like having to sleep in basements, having given very little food. They're showing up to participate in a legal process, and they're just being detained without a place to really like they're in basements without beds with limited food. Uh, and I think that is what has triggered the rioting, the protesting, the disorderly behavior, the lighting of cars on fire. Uh, so, so I think this is, in one sense, this is completely unnecessary. Like that, like the Marines are being sent in. That these people who are participating in a immigration process uh, are being detained, and so especially when it has not been the norm, that if you want to go out and find people who have broken parole or people who have committed crimes and deport them, like focus your effort on those very small percentage of the undocumented aliens that are here. Go and find those, find the people who have actually committed crimes, capture them, deport them. And that's largely what under recent years what ICE has done. They've law abiding or people who aren't breaking the law besides being here without papers, or people who that's what they've done. They've found the people they've committed some crime. They're a true threat to society. Getting those people. That's what ICE has largely done. I saw this one video where there was 2 guys in a van. One was wanted for some violent crime. Another one, he was just he happened to be friends with this guy. They let the guy who had no charges go, and they took the guy who had and so that's what I
You
think.
think that's a more reasonable approach to
Well,
the population? And do you
yeah,
think that that's really kind of the intent of the Trump administration, dating back to
I think
when he was campaigning, the promises he made?
yeah, I think he's making a point. I think he's doing this for for political theater, because I think really this is not good. What you're going to do is anybody who was going to participate in a legal process is going to be more unlikely to do so. They're like, well, forget it. I'm not going to get with the program because they're just um, I'm just going to get rounded up and I'm not going to get a fair shake. So
Fair enough. Do you think that this was new? These are asylum seekers, or these are people who have gotten to their court dates that they received when they came across the border, and it's a bit of a change in approach in
Yeah.
that they're now being treated.
Like
Um,
guilty, like they're being, detained for periods of time. I don't know, like, but these are people who are participating in the process. These aren't just people like randomly showing up. Like, I'm an undocumented immigrant. I'm just going to go to the federal building. These are people who have showed up for their asylum date or their uh, to participate in this process and being detained, and that's what triggered it. Like some pregnant woman's going in, and she's being detained, and they had to let her go because she was like going into the labor. So it's just, and also it's just a super ineffective use of resources, as
Yeah, but let's. I think we agree that I always hate the this is a waste of money discussion, because it is clearly only used when one disagrees with with what's being done with the money.
no, I think you can say
Any
with
other
either.
time they're perfectly fine with us ramping up trillions and tens of trillions of
Well,
dollars of debt. They would just print more money. It's fair. It's clearly
there's
a politically motivated.
well, I think you and I both, we agree on the fact that, like, neither party has practiced, fiscal discipline or fiscal responsibility over, I don't know, the past 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, the last time we had any type of surplus was like, during Clinton's time. And I think that was uh, largely not necessarily due to him. It's just he happened to be the president during that economic period of growth. But I think
Yeah.
the Democrats and the Republicans controlled, I think the House and the Senate during that time. So we can give them a little bit of credit during that time. But I
Well,
think
it's a good time to step back and highlight, and I'll let you get back on
yeah,
track. What it is that we're doing here. We certainly believe that the representatives of our nation, the board of directors, the 535 board of directors, and the rest of the unelected administrators and members of our federal government do a bad job. They don't have our interests in mind. Party affiliation aside, there are many who are well-intended, and many more who are not, and they just want to continue gaming the system, and they spend recklessly, and they couldn't care less about their constituents. And it is, political theater is absolutely a theme that we'll talk about here a lot. It's absolutely what we do in this country, in our federal government, state government as well. So there's a lot of criticism in that regard, but we're trying to uncover that, and we're trying to expose that. And issues like this, I think, will give us the ability to do exactly that, whether it's Republicans, Democrats, state, federal, whatever. The political theater has to go, because it masks very obviously
yeah,
what should be done as a public servant to the benefit of the people, and it's just
yeah.
not done right now.
Well, I think you just got to follow the money. Like our immigration policy is, you have to look at, okay, who benefits from our immigration policy? Well, we all do. If in terms of lower food prices, by having a people come here but not be able to come through legal means, when it's going to, the real benefit is to consumers, you, me, anyone who consumes anything in this country, whether it's, lawn services, food, construction. We all benefit from, and businesses who hire undocumented, because they can pay them lower wages. They can subject them to more harsh working conditions, and they're not going to complain. So we all benefit, sense from the current setup. And
Well, we all benefit from I would disagree. I like where you're going, and I think conceptually, yes, it's important to have immigration into. It's a luxury to have a society and a nation where we are arguably, I think, very clearly, arguably the
yeah,
best landing spot on the planet. That's a luxury for a position
yeah,
for us to be in.
yeah,
But yes, to your point, there is great benefit in allowing the right type of people in a measured
mm,
way, um, that don't tax our resources, actually add to the
mhm,
economy,
yeah,
um, and and um, and we have the right to do that. We have the right to control who comes into our country, and if we want a brain, the opposite of a brain drain,
mhm.
whatever that is. What is that? You're
Yeah,
the
brain
scientist. What would that?
surge,
A brain
brain
surge.
flood.
If we want a global brain surge,
Yeah,
we should be able to do that. I mean, that's how the
mhm,
rich get richer, and we are a rich nation, and
yeah,
we have many people who are very intelligent, who bring great characteristics and great skills and
yeah,
assets to our country. We should take advantage of that. But to your point, yes, there is certainly, for the right people, the people who want to be Americans and
mhm,
want to melt into our culture,
mhm,
and who truly appreciate what it is to be an American. Absolutely, but it
yeah,
has to be measured, and it has to be calculated, and it has to be monitored, and it hasn't been for a long time. So one of the problems with the way
mhm.
I see it, and then I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
turn it back
no,
over
go
to
go
you.
ahead,
But
go ahead.
one of the problems I see is that one side of the political aisle
Mhm,
certainly opened the floodgates
mhm,
for illegal migration, much, much, much more so than the other side. Not to say that the Republicans don't benefit, the
mhm.
bureaucrats don't
Yeah,
benefit from illegal immigration. There's a lot of argument that they do.
mhm,
But one side certainly drove the issue, and there was, I think, nearly a doubling of and we don't really know. It's a hard number to figure out, but
mhm.
a doubling of the number of illegal immigrants in this country, over the past four or 5 years.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's
So,
what yeah, go
but
ahead. I'm
now
sorry,
we're in
go
a
ahead.
now we're in a situation where there's a massive problem that
Mhm,
now has to be addressed with unconventional means. At least that's the position of the one side in support of, at least conceptually, what Trump and his administration is trying to do. Get a
yeah.
handle on something that's absolutely out of control.
No, I think there's two issues here, and like that and I think one of them we'll agree on, and I don't think there's I think having a secure border is a separate issue than our immigration policy. Now they're connected, obviously, but like I think you can have a uh, immigration policy that works for all involved, including the immigrants, as well as having a secure border. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. Now, you know, and I think that the surge we've seen isn't due to I don't think it's largely driven by people's awareness that they can make it to this from other countries like Nicaragua and El Salvador and Venezuela, like that in the past they hadn't, and the conditions in those countries have definitely deteriorated over the past 20 years. So, um, I think
That is
starting it.
irrelevant, though.
Well, no, but it's a new condition. It's not like so. Our policy, like I think at the turn of the century, I think
I see
you
where you're going.
basically, if you showed up at the southern border in the 1900s, I think you like paid $5 and you walked across. And that worked, and no one was, complaining. If you look at no one was like, and then I think there was a little bit of, you know, backlash in like maybe the 30s, the 20s and 30s, and that's where weed got started getting its bad name. It got associated with people coming across the southern border, but it's still our like when we were in the 70s, the 80s. Like no one was, it wasn't an issue. Like those the Cubans showed up in boats in Florida in the 70s, and but they eventually got absorbed into the culture.
Well, after a massive cocaine
Yeah.
uh,
So,
induced affliction on South Florida and the rest of the country.
well, they were supplying demand. They were helping provide. They're capitalists. They're supply and demand, and just the people who largely come across the southern border now, it's a supply and demand thing. If you wanted to get rid of illegal immigration like tomorrow, all you would have to do is like, okay, anybody who hires someone who turns out to be undocumented or an illegal, if you hire them, then you're going to prison or you're getting kicked out of the country. It would be over in a second.
Well, I think keep an eye out for some states to lead the charge there, and Florida may be one of those states. There's been some pretty high profile raids in areas that have kind of highlighted that issue, and the employers are the ones that seems like everybody is kind of focused on.
In Florida, they're on the employers. Like you never see the employers, like when they showed all those guys from Venezuela getting tied hands behind their back and sent down to the jail in El Salvador. Like, where were the employers? Where were the people who were, who were enabling them to be here?
Yeah, they're certainly complicit. It's a great point. And I don't know what would the opposition to that be. I think we would probably have agreement on that. I think we'd be at 76% on that.
Probably not, because the people would be like, oh, they had some forged papers. They're just, but like you're the business person. You set the wages, you do the process. Like you're holding up, a loaf of bread to a starving person, and you're offering the bread to the starving person, and the person takes the bread, and like, it's like, who's at fault here? But I think it's simple. If we had, people who are really, it's a simple solution, like a guest worker program where people, before they come, they can make an appointment, they can submit their paperwork, they can prove they're not a criminal, they can, come here, they could, and it could be, they're sponsored by an employer. And it would be, and then they could even sign up to be like, here's their address, here's where they're going to be, report back in, 6 months or a year, or we're going to check on you where you're at. And like, if you had a guest worker program, 95 to 99% of this immigration problem goes away. The people who come here, they come here to work, send money back to their families, or they often go back, they come, they work during the season they're here for. They go back, and it's, the people who, and if you had a good guest worker program, anybody who's sneaking over the border, they're up to no good. They're smuggling something in. They're up, there's a reason. And focus your efforts and energies on that very small percentage of people than the people who are just coming here because their country is and.
I think the American people would largely be on board with trying to come up with a framework for doing just that, because I think most people would agree that the people who are coming here and working, and they truly are looking for a better life, and they want to work hard, and they do love the country, and they appreciate the resources that are here. They don't take advantage of the resources that are here. There is a lot of that, obviously.
I think that's
and it sure seems like, in fact, I have no problem stating that, without direct evidence at my fingertips, that one side of the federal government was aiding and abetting that kind of behavior. Come in, we'll set you up on some welfare programs. We'll fly you wherever you want to go in the country. Like, okay, so now clearly that's very different than vetting you and kind of and a guest worker program where the things that you're talking about makes a lot of sense and everybody can get on board with. So and again, back to what we're trying to do here at the 76 is identify that. What are these political motivations? Why aren't you just looking out for the best interest of your constituents and more largely the American people? And what is your agenda here? What are you doing? And should you be put on trial? Should you be the one that's deported?
I'd be okay with that. I'd be like, okay, we're going to deport you both, you, the person who offered the job, and the person. Now, I think it'd be great. Like And Trump, he likes to build things. Instead of building a wall, build a city, build a big, beautiful city on the border with Mexico, where you have schools and you have places where people can, when they like assimilated, or they can learn the language, where workers can meet, where if you've got some chicken poultry processing plant, you can drive down there, you can try, pick them up, you can interview them, where so it can be this orderly thing where it's a great place of culture exchange. All the places that
that's an interesting idea. That's an interesting idea. And I don't, I kind of laughed at the poultry process. It should be tough. It should be tough to enter the country, and it should be tough forever. It should be tough like every teenage boy or girl has some tough work experience early on. It's very good for them to learn that construction is hard work, being out in the being outside, and maybe it's not for you, maybe it is, but that hard work builds character, and we absolutely have the right to do things like that to kind of shape our future citizens.
I think anyone who's willing to walk several hundred miles across a desert, through a river, to get to work as a busboy or to work as a menial job, work on a farm, like that's the type of person you want in this country. We got people who won't get up off their ass, who are born here to work any of these jobs. That's why you see so many help wanted signs everywhere, because the Americans don't want the. I don't blame. I've had those jobs. You've had those jobs. They were terrible. They were hard jobs. It's like that was what always motivated me every summer, was to go back to college. Was like I was always look forward to summer, but by the end of summer, I was like, oh, thank God, I can go back to just sitting and taking notes in a classroom and typing a paper. This is way easier than busting my butt working in a factory or moving furniture or doing construction labor.
I don't think that we would have I don't think that we would be at odds with one another right now. Not you and I, but generally in this country, if we had done things right in the first place. And that really, again, speaks back to what we're trying to do here. There's so much nonsense. There's so many agendas, and it's all corruption based. I believe a lot of it anyway, influence and power and money based, without the constituents and the, truly the best union that we can put together. And then once the basics are taken care of, we can go after ideas that Estonia, and I do. It's funny. I do find myself continuing to reference. I've done some reading on it since you brought it up. At what a luxury they have to kind of start from scratch with a smaller population, and we really should be. We should spend an entire segment on that pretty soon. In fact, I think we should.
All right, I'll be well prepared with.
You're going to lead on that one for sure.
Okay.
But I mean, let's not forget, it's not everybody who's coming across the border. Who just because they made their way across the desert and really wanted to, that they're noble and pure. And I don't know what that percent is. I really
bet it's
would like
the same.
that, but
You get a group of people, you get 100 people, you're going to have, most of the people are going to be good, decent people who want to, and you're going to have a few people who are bad apples. You're going to have, I think.
Yeah, but most and few, you can't put those terms into a spreadsheet. And I think the numbers really matter, because if 10 million people came across the border, and even only if 10% of them have bad intentions, they're part of MS-13 or Tren de Aragua or they're terrorists. And we haven't talked much about that as a society. And I think that's a real concern.
Well, I think
it's something we should be quite terrified about, kind of every day.
Well, we should have. This is why we need to have a secure border, and so you can focus on catching those people with bad intent. Like if you look at just general the rate of crimes committed by undocumented immigrants versus the U.S. citizens, it's well documented, according to the FBI and many others, that the rate of crime is much lower among illegal immigrants than it is against U.S. citizens. It's like far lower, and it makes sense if you're
overall crime, violent crime, what kind of crime?
Overall crime, all crime. And
so there's a lot of ways to look at that, and also we shouldn't let it, back to the original point, we shouldn't let one criminal into this country. We don't have to, and we should not do it. So why did we? Why was there such opposition to these borders being closed? by the Democrats. The Democrats and the liberals do not want the borders closed. Why is that?
I think it's a I think the positive or non-cynical view is that for humanitarian reasons, these are people, they should be treated like people, not animals or things. The cynical view would be like, well, they believe that if they come here, they're more likely to turn out to like vote Democratic. And so, but I think largely it's for humanitarian reasons. These are people, they should be treated humanely. But like, just because someone comes here doesn't mean that they should necessarily be a citizen or be availed of certain rights. Like, they should have rights, but not necessarily privileges of being a citizen. And most of them, I think that's what they want. They just want to be able to, live in a place where it's relatively safe, where they can raise their kids and their kids can have a better chance at a life than what they had where they came from. If they can't vote, if they, if they can't get Medicare or Medicaid, I mean, most of them are young. Most of them, like a lot of them, are paying into Social Security. The ones that are working under a bogus Social Security number, they're paying into a Social Security system that they're never going to get the benefits from. So I think, in terms of, if you do like the economic analysis, sure, there's some people, they make use of hospital services and, but they're also, a lot of them are paying taxes. Maybe they're not paying, federal income taxes, but probably a lot of them don't make enough to pay that much in income tax, but they pay sales tax, they pay gas tax, they pay, if they're renting a house, they're paying real estate taxes through their landlord. So they're, the economic, plus, I think, far outweighs any services that they're perhaps utilizing. And
I think we should dig into that, because I disagree. Neither of us has the excuse, by the way, to not be prepared, since neither of us is employed right now. but well, it's on the standard definition of employment anyway.
But I mean, like, if you just look at the numbers, the vast majority of the people who immigrate here are young. The vast majority of young people are healthy. You don't have like 65, 70-year-old people with COPD and cancer coming here. You've got like 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds coming here. And just statistically, they're not racking up huge, medical bills.
They shouldn't have access to any of the resources.
Well, if they pay for it, like, I think, like, it's, I'm not saying, like, sure, like, they shouldn't come here and be able to roll in, they get unemployment insurance. I don't think many of them do. Like, so
let's get to those numbers.
That fool the system and they can find a way in. But if you had a guest worker program, and there have been bipartisan attempts in Congress, I think McCain and others, had tried to get some type of guest worker program. It's like,
McCain and his Democratic counterpart, his Democratic colleagues.
Yeah, I think there has been efforts, and Congress has always squashed any attempt at a guest worker program.
I was commenting on your bipartisan comment about McCain representing the Republicans. He certainly did not.
Well, he's identified as a Republican, but
well, that opens a can of worms. That's something that I would be using often, and if I were a member of our Congress, which
I read something. I flew in and out of LaGuardia. I'm going to give a plug to LaGuardia, of all things. And
it's one of the best airports out there now, right?
It is. It's like,
it's amazing, right?
Like, it used to be just like a bad bus terminal. It was
terrible.
It
was the worst. Yeah,
it was worse. And I'm like, what is it? It's like this light area. They've got these nice bars all over the place. It's like, I don't want to leave. I want to stay in LaGuardia. But so I looked up LaGuardia. I sent a text to some guys I know in California that are from New York, and anyway, they you made some comments about, like, LaGuardia. At one point, he was like the mayor of New York, like in the 30s and 40s, and he was described as a Republican socialist. So I don't know exactly. I guess he was definitely pro-labor, pro-union, but he was a Republican. So back in the 30s and 40s, they had like Republican socialists, which I didn't dig into it too deeply. But yeah,
I don't know. Maybe that's the what became the fiscal conservative social democrat of the
I don't know.
90s or
The only
whatever.
other factoid I know about LaGuardia, he's got some interesting name, but that in 1993, according to some source, if you look at his Wikipedia page, he was ranked the #1 big city mayor of all time. No, so that's what you get. You do that, you get an airport named after you.
I guess so. I guess so. And eventually a good one.
Yeah,
It took decades, but you had to be at the bottom of the barrel for decades. But eventually, after you're long gone and your children are long gone,
yeah,
your airport is great.
But anyway, so just a little aside about
Yeah. Well, so I think, my main point on bringing up what is viewed by many people on the right, certainly that this problem was not created by by their side of the political aisle. And so it's very difficult then to address a problem that was a major problem for or a major issue for Trump's victory and his popularity in general, controlling the
Yeah,
border and
yeah. I mean, it was
and
a mess.
doing something about the
It was
criminal
a mess.
element.
It was a mess down there. No doubt about it.
Um, it's been uh, it's been perpetuated by Democrats and
Democrats, they handled it poorly. I think Trump handled it poorly when he was separating families and putting family people in
look, if
cages.
you
And
commit a
then Trump,
crime, if you commit a crime,
yeah.
if you go out and you commit a crime, you will be separated from your family. Whose fault is that? The system, the policeman? No, it's your fault.
But there was I mean, there was a policy where and this is what the immigrants were under. Like, just because you were an immigrant coming somewhere and you doesn't mean that you should be treated inhumanely. And the policy, so there's no benefit to taking this person who's just trying to come here to better the lives, and they were under an understanding like this is what you do: you turn yourself in, and then you get your day in court. And
you get your day in court 6 or 7 years later, and then you
yeah.
disappear into the fabric of society and take all the resources you can.
As
I'm
as a
just telling you what the
libertarian,
perception is,
yeah,
and I think
this
a
is
fair amount of reality, and it's now a national crisis, and now when there's an attempt to address it and eliminate the criminal element and the potential terrorist risk, which, by the way, we've had people directly opposing judges and legislators and at the state level, at municipal levels, directly opposing the removal of these criminals, the sanctuary cities. You are welcome here no matter what. These are policies and behaviors that have exacerbated this problem and led us to where we are today. So you can't divorce how we got here from what the solution is now. And what that means always is when the problem gets unnecessarily worse, the solution will be more harsh. And I think that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, perhaps, but I think you could do it. I think you could, I think illegal immigration across the southern border has kind of, for a number of reasons, more troops there, the fact that people realize that they're not going to be able to apply for asylum. So so people crossing the border illegally on the southern border is at this point kind of maybe a solved problem. And in terms of they realize that they're not, so
we stopped the flow.
Yeah, it stopped the flow has to a trickle. So I don't necessarily, I will say that, yeah, the problem has been addressed. I wouldn't, it wouldn't have been the way I would have addressed it but so anyway, so talking about, where do we go from here?
And one other thing, the more evidence that the Democratic Party was very much in support of keeping the borders open, whether there were massive criminal entities and people coming in or not. They stopped the construction of the wall, talked about the environmental impact of the wall. When Trump was coming back into power, Biden was well, probably not Biden, but whomever was controlling the government in his last few days, maybe the entire time, they're racing to sell, at massive taxpayer loss. They're trying to sell all the components, all the raw materials for the wall. It's just that's criminal behavior in and of itself. So it's squarely the problem and the degree of problem, the magnitude of the problem that we have is squarely on the shoulders of the Democratic Party.
Well,
Just
I
is. So where are
mean,
we going from here?
I'd say, you know, the Democrats, you know, they deserve as much blame as Republicans. Like, if you want to go back to like in the
They
90s,
deserve all the blame.
okay, so if you go back to the 90s, like where like in the 90s we never talked about like, so I want to push back on a couple of things. Like, one, if we hadn't seen the videos of what was going on the southern border, we wouldn't even be like, no one would be talking about this. So in terms of it being a national crisis, like businesses didn't close, you know, everything operated pretty much. Yeah, it was a mess down on the border, but it didn't really change, you know, the comings and goings in the daily lives of the vast majority of Americans.
But that's a not in my backyard problem, which is
Yeah,
so destructive. That's so destructive.
but
And actually, I think that is the main reason why we're in the situation that we are more broadly as a country,
it's a
why our debt
problem.
is so large.
It's a
Because
problem.
people they have their jobs, they have their 401k funded, they get a new car every 3 years, they watch their football game, they get drunk every weekend. It's a pretty good life, they think. So
Sure.
what do I care until it
a
comes onto my
problem.
doorstep? And that's a problem. That's a terrible mentality.
Well, I'm saying, yes, that it was a problem, but it's not a national crisis. A national crisis is like the fate of the country as at risk. Like, you know, our spending, our national spending, that's a national crisis. That's something that's going to affect everyone. That could cause the entire country to just implode. But you know, people coming across the border like without papers was never like, you know, a national crisis. I think Trump found it was a useful political tool, and he used it very effectively, and it was part of why he got elected.
I don't know. I think it was. I disagree. I mean,
so if you could choose between two things to fix, you know, you could wipe out the national debt or our deficit spending. Like, we just never, if we could say, I'm never going to have another illegal person come into this country, or I'm never going to have the U.S. Have a deficit again, which would you choose?
To eliminate deficit spending, to have a balanced budget every year going forward, and also we'll throw in eliminate debt and get back to
we have fiscal
fiscally sound. We're no longer
versus So
we're no longer on the doorstep of losing of Rome burning.
Yeah, we're not the drug addicted. So and like that. So
we got a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Or allow any more, not a single illegal immigrant across the border. I mean, it's
obvious for me. I'm going to go with, let's be fiscally responsible, and we'll deal with the. Yeah, you have a guess. You know,
but then we would deal with it. I understand where you're going with it, but it's not a great question. Fiscal responsibility and solving our debt crisis and getting our country more healthy, because I think we're at severe risk of death by losing our global reserve currency status.
We can survive death. We can survive if we want to be obese and we want to be unhealthy. Like, the vast majority of people's contributions to society, come before they're going to drop dead of a heart attack. You can be really unhealthy and still work and be a productive member of society and drop dead at 55, 60. So, I mean, it's a problem, but it's not a national crisis. I'm splitting hairs.
I'm not a big fan of the big beautiful bill, which addresses a lot of Trump's policy promises and campaign promises. And it does, I'm told it does all kinds of good things for promoting, Trump's agenda. I'm not a huge fan of that. I was very happy that the border was addressed immediately. I think it's a gigantic problem. It has nothing to do with fear of it. What it has to do is the expenditure of resources we don't have, exacerbating that problem, that debt problem and deficit problem, and it has to do with a safety and security concern. And I think that people are naive to think that there hasn't been a massive criminal element that's come across that border with all kinds of nefarious intent. I
Well,
just
we should see just, I mean, crime had been dropping in this country, violent crime, particularly over the past like 30 years. It's been continually going down. There's headlines, there are terrible things that happen, but largely crime has been going down. So now, like if you're right, over the next 4 years, we should have almost basically zero crime. And
well,
I suspect it's gonna be flat, or it's gonna actually,
I'm sure that you know, will you'll tell me about
I'll,
that being wrong.
I'm going to email every time I see her. This American
Yeah.
committed this crime. No.
You show up at my place of employment and harass me daily. I'm sure. Well, you know, that goes back to, again, another absurdity in this political theater that we're forced to be subjected to. Day one does not, you know, economic policy does not shift and have all of its effect day one of a new
No.
administration, nor does it stop from the pre. So it's a very difficult conversation to have. It's going to take some time, especially if people are destroying LA when you try to, you know, make good on the promise to start to eliminate some of the illegal immigrants that are here. And by the way, waiving, I don't understand. Maybe you can explain to me, you know, who really is in LA. You know, I don't know if this one has the yeah, there, well, I don't know, you can't really see. I thought that there was a Mexican flag being waved there, but you see it all over the place.
I think that's
I
after
don't understand that.
that's actually after the Pacers won last night. I think that's Indianapolis.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Well, I've heard that as a, you know, all joking aside, I've heard that as some you know, justification for rioting and the absurdity, largely peaceful protest. You know, peaceful protest, like these people, like they're what they don't know is that their grift is continuing. That they believe their grift is continuing, and that there's no risk to it coming to an end, which it is coming to an end. People are onto them, and we're going to make them aware make people aware of who these bureaucrats are and how they use their political theater to try to, you know, prevent us from paying attention. Nobody believes that anymore. Nobody believes that these are largely peaceful protests. We see them stopping
I think
traffic.
This is a very, you know, very like, you know, nicely framed photo of, like, it looks like terror, but there's a few Waymos that, you know, got destroyed. Like you look at this picture and you think all LA, it's like a 3 or 4 block area, and, you know, where there's people, you know, behaving badly.
I don't know. I mean, I think people are being brought up on attempted murder charges of against federal agents. I think some people are going to face some serious charges, and I guess we finally saw Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom. Here's Karen Bass. We're going to get into her a little bit later. She's quite a peach. And then this guy, and you can kind of see him doing a little bit of his. I don't know if you've watched this guy and the way that he moves around so much when he talks. I mean, speaking of, you know, not what were we talking about earlier, touching your face and what that may indicate. This guy's a walking sideshow with all of his hand gestures.
I think he very much, you know, an opportunist, you know, just based from the time, you know, I won't get into, you know, what I heard, like having lived in the Bay Area with people who, back when he was the mayor of San Francisco, but there was a lot of people, even these are like Democrats, who, you know, see him as not a good person, as an opportunistic, and you see that anyway. But I want to talk about, like, take a step back and talk about just in terms of missed opportunity. Like, and this doesn't take a lot of creativity; it takes a slightly different perspective. But like, and we talked about this a little bit before, like, these are people who are self-importing themselves. You know, like, people, you know, are this great economic engine. You can give a person, a ham sandwich, they can give them the energy to generate all types of wealth in a factory, building something, writing code, you know, like, it doesn't take, people are these fabulous economic engines. You can train them to do just about anything. You can train them to speak different languages.
The good ones.
Pretty much, like, pretty much anyone. Like, it is you can train. I don't think that train a person. You can train almost anybody to do, you know, some useful task and be economic. Everybody who has a job, in theory, is an economic machine in terms of you got to have some basic shelter, and you give them a certain amount of calories, and they can do remarkable things. Pretty much anyone, a job working at McDonald's, working as a CEO, they're economic engines, and you've got millions of people around the world who want to come here and be an economic. They're self-importing themselves. Like if cars showed up, like a person compared to a car, if cars were just pulling up, or someone was dropping off cars at the U.S. border, we wouldn't be like, no cars, no, we'd be taking them if there were laptops or hammers.
Yeah, but those cars wouldn't be, if this were true, and this is the tough thing about economic principles. If that were true broadly, and it's true again, I think it's right. The good ones, yes. Is there initially deficit spending? Is there for that economic engine? Is there?
Yeah.
Well, you have to give them a ham sandwich for a month before they turn cash flow positive or whatever for whatever.
I think an immigrant is the most, like, for a country. You've got 2 kids. The most expensive time, kids are like a terrible investment. Like from 0 to 18, it's just they don't really produce a lot. They're a negative cash flow. They just take money, clothes, food, and they don't really generate too much. Maybe they, load the dishwasher or do a terrible job mowing the yard, but they're really you get someone to 18 years old. And
that brings back some memories. Shocking.
No one's
may have been the worst. The lawnmower quality or lawn mowing quality may have been the worst of or the best example of that.
But you got these people largely about 18, 19 years old. They're fully grown. Someone has put the money into growing them from babies, and maybe they need to improve their English, or they learn to know how to work with sheet metal. But the vast majority of the cost to creating this economic engine has already been, paid by another country. And so you need to.
I don't think the numbers, I again, conceptually, as an economic principle and all else equal, I get it. But the numbers just don't.
You give me 2 countries. One country gets basically 18-year-olds who don't speak the language imported for free, versus the country who has to raise every worker up from 18. That country that's importing 18-year-olds fully grown has a huge advantage in terms of economic advantage.
But that cost is borne by the family, or certainly should be. I mean, if we had zero debt in this country. Yeah. If we had zero debt and we weren't spending trillions every year in deficit spending, I would entertain the argument, but it's just not the case.
But it's the tax. You can we've got cities in this country that are just collapsing, decaying, because you go to places like Akron and all over the Midwest, you got these little towns and mid-sized cities that at some point, were pretty nice places to live that are just kind of being abandoned. You got places in Detroit where it's going, the neighborhoods are going back to nature, where if you had people who was like, hey, who would like to be a carpenter, who would like to be a plumber, who would like to become a dentist, and you get all like, all right, you're going to go and live in this city for the next 10 years. And you would have a lot of takers among these immigrants. Here's this old house, it needs to be fixed up. And that would be a great.
I think you're absolutely right.
You got taxpayers, you got people improving our infrastructure, you got, people who are fixing up these places that, hey, you want to come here? We got this town. We need a baker. We need someone to run a restaurant. We need someone.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of merit in that. I really do. The problem continues to be we're not there. We're not shaping a society from scratch, and we don't have the people at the helm who have any interest in pursuing things like that. I think Detroit is an example. We've missed a massive opportunity to test out maybe a new approach to education, which we talked about last week. Mm-hmm. It's coming in with new schools without the unions. highly qualified teachers. We pay them well. We take whatever we need from the tax base. There's no corruption. There's no wasteful spending. There's no fraud. I have no doubt that we could put together a system, but we don't have bureaucrats at the state, federal, or municipal levels who have any interest in that being accomplished. And that's really a problem. And that is what we need to get to. There'll be time for exactly what you're talking about. How great is that? Like, especially if your entire family comes, or people, and you've got a tribe of 50 people, extended family members, and you go to Detroit and you all fix each other's houses, and you almost like an Amish style community. That's amazing. It's a terrific idea.
And you see that you see in immigrant communities, that's exactly what happens. One small family gets there, then their cousins come, and their nephews come, their aunts, and you have whole like neighborhoods that kind of flourish, and like cities that become, and these ones that are like largely driven by families expanding out through extended family, turned into pretty nice places to live. There's that who are the productive members of society. And this is
your earlier point about the Cubans, by the way, is great, tying into that, because they did exactly, forget about a lot of the drugs and that part of the problem, but they largely have done a terrific job establishing themselves, and have in most ways assimilated to what it is that we do here. They work extremely hard. They've built those communities, and they've prospered. They've prospered so greatly.
Yeah.
How amazing to see that. That's awesome. That's welcome here all the time.
Immigrants, I think, inherently, wherever you come from,
it has to be done right.
Are going to be good in capitalistic societies. Like, if you got on a wooden ship and willing to like endure overseas, a journey 300 years ago, 200 years ago, if you're willing to take that risk, the people who wouldn't take that risk stayed home. And so it's naturally, we like the U.S. population, are the people who came here. It's enriched for people who are innovative and risk takers and willing to sacrifice. And so I don't think that's changed. The people, wherever you come from, if you're willing to immigrate to another country where you don't speak the language, you don't know anyone, you've got something inside of you that is going to do well in a free capitalistic society. You're going to be an entrepreneur.
Those people, I think 76% of us are going to absolutely agree are welcome here through a measured and calculated system to produce that outcome. Absolutely.
I don't think you need to be, I think there needs to be a process, and it needs to be, objective, but I don't think we need quotas. I don't think we need to set quotas. Like, you need to be able to.
We have a resource problem now. We have massive. We need to be making some seriously difficult decisions about our expenditures going forward. Money just doesn't get printed, and we have some real problems.
This is like free. This is like if someone's offering us free fuel or free oil or free cars. These are
we're gonna let's talk about that later, because I disagree completely. Let's highlight that as something to go back and bring some numbers and bring some stats. Let's have a real debate about that, because I just I don't see it. I don't see it.
Yeah. I think the vast majority of the immigrants, they come, they're employed, they get jobs, they're working. Like, the vast majority of immigrants are not unemployed, and if they're not, it's just because they're not allowed to.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's circle the wagons on this one and come back at it. This is an important one.
Okay.
This homeless person that I brought up on the screen here. Oh wait, no, sorry, that's Maxine Waters. That's somebody we need to highlight as a worthless member of Congress for, I don't know, 150 years by the looks of her. She wants to know, who are these people participating in the riots? Why are there? Why does it seem like these are only criminals? A lot of people believe that they're paid, paid participants. Antifa. When you have stacks of bricks on street corners and things like that we've seen over the past. I'm not sure that we've seen that in this one, to be completely upfront. But who are these people? And then I want to ask a question, which I think is interesting, and I think it's thought provoking, related to a Florida law that came out of some of the rioting that was going on during COVID, with the protesters. The intent was to here, I have it right here. The intent was to protect police officers,
Mm-hmm.
and also to, Florida's anti-riot law,
Mm-hmm.
HB1, passed in 2021. The purpose was to protect, to increase the criminal penalty for participating in violent riots. There's a very big difference between protests and truly a peaceful
Yeah. Yeah.
protest and a violent riot, which LA always seems to take front and center stage on trying to lead the country. Maybe it's just the weather. Maybe it's the proximity to the southern border. I don't think so.
Well, it's really nice out there. You want to golf or riot?
Yeah, in Chicago, there's not a lot of activity going on
No. You
during
got those nice
January.
days. You want to be out on the golf course or at the beach. It's like we got limited days,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, no days are really that great. But so and one thing that this did do with the protections for drivers, as you look at the people going out onto the highway or even in the cities and surrounding cars, and they get to the point where they're threatening anyone and everyone who's in their way.
They should definitely be arrested and
well, I mean, if let's say you're in that car with your family and you're being surrounded and people start beating on your car, do you have the right to hit the gas and get the hell out of there?
Well, I would say
that's what this law says. And I agree with it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be ultimately, and this is why we have juries, so
I mean, just conceptually, forget about
blocking a road if they claim to be fleeing for safety. So, I mean, it's not. I don't think if that's actually how the law is written, exactly how it. I think it's problematic. I mean, the sentiment. I agree. If you feel threatened, and I think there's laws already that if you feel your life is being threatened and you injure someone in the course of protecting you, like I think you're covered. But I think you're opening up a can of worms here of where. People are going to be perhaps blocking a road, which I'm not a fan of in the form of protest. But if someone's peacefully protesting by blocking a road, I don't agree that someone can claim, well, I felt
that's
like,
not a peaceful protest. You don't get to infringe upon somebody else's freedom.
But I think that's where the police, like anybody who's like blocking a road in a peaceful protest, like if they're adhering to the principles of nonviolence, they should be open to being like the police should come and they should arrest them, and the people staging the protest should be fine with that. That's kind of during when Martin Luther King and people like Gandhi, part of nonviolent protest was you accepted the consequences, and you allowed yourself to be arrested and processed and go to jail. And I think it's a civilized way to have protests. So
Gandhi, by the way, was a horrible person.
Who?
Martin Luther King certainly had his negative personal side, but his heart was in the right place. And I think he's rolling over in his grave watching what happened to the civil rights movement in this country. But
another
time. You brought up Gandhi. I can't let Gandhi go by without pointing out he was a horrible person.
Gandhi was a horrible person.
Horrible person. We'll get into that later. Let me write that down.
I have to admit it was a very long movie. I think I probably dozed off. I think it was one of those two-parters. So I'm not an expert on Gandhi, but I think the idea of nonviolent peaceful protest is a very powerful. It's a good thing that any free society should welcome and support. But that does not extend to blocking traffic, without, agreeing to being arrested. I think you can also have a lot more, for one thing, if you're blocking traffic, you're really not going to change any minds. You're just going to piss off a lot of people who might be on the fence. And then otherwise, like if I'm trying to get to O'Hare to make a flight to do my job and you're blocking my ability to do my job, and, I'm not going to, and if I'm on the fence, that's not going to make me think, well,
I certainly feel like if my safety is in question, I think it's a justified move. Like if you're standing in front of a car that people are threatening the driver, you should probably know that there's a good chance you're going to get run over. And if you don't, congratulations, you're a Darwin Award recipient. And that's fine. That's how the herd is called.
Well,
but beyond that, so I'm squarely in that camp. But beyond that, if you're getting in the way of me making my flight,
Mhm.
for some stupid protest or even
Mhm.
a noble protest, but not
Yeah.
my thing,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of argument and justification for violently removing those people as well.
Well, I think the police should be equipped and able to arrest people like using using force, but not violence. I think there's a difference between force and violence, and I think that's often lost in, you know, that you can, be physical. You can use, uh, you can use force. You can physically remove someone without being violent. Uh,
Sometimes
sometimes,
in a perfect world,
yeah,
but we're talking about like when it doesn't become so
yeah.
perfect.
But so in terms of
I
like,
would have no problem stomping on the gas if somebody's beating my car, my family's in the car, if I'm in there by myself and
sure,
I am
I'd have no problem with that
yeah.
if you're truly feeling threatened. But I think there's already laws, But if Florida wants to spell it out, this is why I'm all in favor of states being able to enact laws that they feel are
Yeah, I
appropriate.
don't
If the
know. I think
majority of
some of the
people,
liberal states are very much not. They do very much do not have those laws, and
yeah,
I think the general tendency to favor the criminals in those liberal states, yours is one of them,
hmm
um, makes me think at least think about it. I'd be much
yeah,
more comfortable doing it in a
yeah,
more sane state like Florida than yours.
yeah. Uh, Laws should be passed at the level of government where consensus can be reached, either the city
Yep,
level, the
I got
state
that.
level, and the important part is, and if a consensus can't be reached, and I'm going to put out 2/3 is what I think is a consensus, then there should be no law passed. So if you can't agree on forest fire prevention at this level, or if you can't agree on what should happen to this slug at or whatever the issue is, then there should be no law. And it should just go back. And ultimately, then it comes down to an individual, what they want to do. And you've got the backstop of the Constitution, and you also got juries too. Like people can always make use of, So anyway, that's number
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
Laws should be passed at the level of government where there can be consensus, no law. The other one is, which is related to that, is that people need to be okay with people living in places in another place that have laws that they disagree with and be okay with that. And if that means you live in a place where a law was passed that you don't like, your option really is to leave or just live with it. So if you live in California, you don't like the law that's happening in Alabama, you need to be okay with that. If the law was passed, so those are kind of two are paired together. And I think that eliminates a whole lot of, you know, uh, need to do. People can you just
Yeah,
like
it's
live
got some
in
merit.
yeah,
It should also eliminate the electoral college opposition too, right? And the flyover state mentality and the popular
yeah.
vote should drive the election outcome. And I know that's
Well, I
opening up
mean, the
a
electoral
big can of
college,
worms.
it's in the Constitution, I think. Yeah, it's in the Constitution. It's
Yeah,
law at the very least. It's um, and so if you want to change it, if you want to have proportional representation, which I'd be in favor of, well, get a consensus. And there are states that have some type of proportional representation in the electoral college. There's a few, like I think in Kansas or Nebraska, someplace in
yeah. There's
there
a few that split. Yeah, yeah.
that do have
Maine,
they do have proportional. And so,
is it
but
Maine
yeah,
or
yeah, like if they
um,
so anyway,
okay.
if you want to change the law, and so this is
What's the
why
what's the
these
third one? What's the third one?
those are my two. I'm going to put those two out
Okay.
there for this show. I got to save something for like I'll put
Yeah.
those.
For last week, just so we for keeping track, public education is important. That was one. All children deserve a quality education. Remember, we have to go as low as we have to go. Some of these will seem
So I'm gonna
so elementary.
I think you'll probably get agreement on that. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna be the contrarian here, and I'm gonna say, because
And
I'm going
you
to
don't
say that
seem
all
so.
children. I'm going to say all children do not deserve a children deserve the education that like in terms of like children should get the education that their parents enable for them. Like, I'm not going to say like
Hmm.
you have a right to an education. I'm not going to say you have a right to health care. Uh, when you say
Was
deserve, when
as a
someone says
conservative,
deserve,
I believe that this country offers right for children, despite their horrible parents, to at least have a chance to get ahead with a quality education. And we talked about it last week, but it doesn't need to go beyond the ability to read well on grade or more advanced. I think is more reasonable than your grade level and advanced math skills.
I think you'll get 76. I think you'll get 76% agreement on that. But I'm going to push back on the deserve part. Like if you could rephrase it, you might get me on board. I think it's a good thing. Okay. I'd agree that it's a good thing for children to get a solid educational and start to life. That's a beneficial thing for society. What I'm going to object to is the deserve. When someone says deserve,
fair enough.
I hear right, and people, I think, in my libertarian view, the word right is something that's used far too easily. Like,
okay, well, it's a privilege then, because then if you come in and you disrupt other students, just like it is a libertarian principle, you're out. You're out. You don't deserve.
But that's downstream. That's downstream because like when I think of a right, this is kind of like how I see. I think a right is something you are owed and part of an agreement, and so we have.
Yeah, we're on the same page with that. I agree.
And the Bill of Rights is basically like, okay, I am accepting the legitimacy of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as the law of the land. But so I accept the Constitution as the law of the land, but in exchange for that, I'm getting these rights. They're owed to me. This is an agreement between, individual person and a government. Like, I get these rights, and these rights are not necessarily things that I am owed in terms of material things or need you to provide me. Like, these are things that basically limit what the federal government can do. All the Bill of Rights is basically limitations on the government. Yeah, none of the Bill of Rights is like you get a car, or you get health care. It's like
life, liberty, and the pursuit of property.
Like you are owed that we are not going to do these things. It's not we are going to do these things. And I think somehow that got lost where, like, okay, instead of you have these rights of things that the government is not going to do, it's like, now these rights are things the government is going to do for me. And I think that's problematic. It becomes, and it's all well-meaning, like healthcare, education. These are all the things that the government is going to do for me. Like, wait a second, this is a very different thing of you agreeing not to do
there is
something.
No right to healthcare insurance.
Yeah, there's no
right to healthcare.
Because as soon as what you're saying, basically, when the government starts making promises of what they're going to do for you as opposed to not do to you, then it's putting a burden on other people. There's no burden on someone else for me to have the freedom of speech or freedom of religion or due process or any of those things. Yeah. But as soon as the government says, Mike, you've got a right to education, you've got a right to healthcare, all of a sudden, well, Brad, pony up. Mike needs these things. It's on you. And so I think that is a fundamental conversation that, like, that's why when you say deserve, I hear right. And that's why
fair enough. Yeah. You're being a dead horse.
Okay.
You're giving
me you need a little graphical icon of a dead horse with, just getting.
We'll get there.
Okay.
We currently don't have this.
Yeah.
Quality education. That was another one. The Department of Education should in fact be abolished. I think we reached agreement last week. You and I did.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with it. No, I think, yeah.
It doesn't belong. It doesn't make any sense.
It's definitely not. The federal government should not.
It's wild. It is a slush fund. It is a mechanism for corruption and
the whole idea that the federal, like, the states pay money to the federal government that they then portion back out is like, just have the states keep their money, let the states have as good.
$15 billion just stays in the federal government for some reason, and then there's a bunch of interaction with teachers unions that are the third or the fifth micro agreement from last week. Teachers unions are not interested in teaching.
Well, I'd rephrase it.
We need to work on that one, but you get the point. Yeah,
teachers unions are definitely problematic, I think.
And remember, some of these micro agreements are they're out there for discussion, and eventually I'd love to see the technology and it's not a survey monkey, anything like that. It's going to be our own, but the mechanism to have our community vote and have not like a Joe Biden vote where votes magically appear to sway the sway the vote in one difficult to believe right before your eyes direction, but like a real representation of where we stand as a society, and see if we can reach those micro agreement levels, and then bigger agreements and bigger agreements. We continue to grow what we actually believe, so we can tell these bureaucrats, we're not interested in you anymore. You're a bunch of nonsense and political theater. You're not actually interested in promoting, policy to benefit the children and the mothers and the impoverished, and like you continually parade yourself around as being. And we got it from here. And we know where we agree.
Yeah, I think I think we can get agreement on a lot of things. Let me put on my cynical hat here as the humidity continues to increase here, is that I think there's something structurally with our current processes as they are. I think there's something structurally about them that will prevent like real meaningful change, because at the end of the day, like the system works for the people who are like in the system, like the people, like you don't see people who get elected to Congress, suffering all that much. Like, oh yeah, I was in Congress for all these years and now I can barely make ends meet. You never see that. Like Congress works well for people in Congress. Being in the Senate works well for people in the Senate. People who can afford lobbyists, it works well for them. So the system is working for a whole, not maybe percentage wise,
no doubt about it.
But the people, it's working for the people who controlled the system. And so changing that, is going to be really hard. Like, I don't know, that
it will be really hard. It's a great point. And there's one other kind of related point, which is, at some point we pass over, I forget what it's called, but you pass over 50% of the population is receiving more from the federal government or various governments than they're putting in, right? And at that point, they'll continue to vote for those policies to be in place and to continue benefiting them at the expense of everybody else. So that's some threshold that is, worrisome with a society. Those people continue to vote for policy. So somewhat related to that, don't underestimate, and I'll bring this guy back up again. Remember the first three things after Trump won. Mm-hmm. He starts a podcast and he invites like three of the most conservative-minded guests right off the bat to repackage his worthless self.
Yeah, he's
pivoting. So these people, it's not just money. It's not just comfort for their family and security. These people operate very differently. He needs a spotlight on him. He needs to. This guy doesn't want to ride off into the sunset with his tens of millions of dollars, as Pelosi.
I would classify him as most of the people, like, as an opportunist. I think
they want the popular. They want to be the popular kid, and he never was. Obviously, I mean, look at him. He's an absolute loser. You can tell by looking at him. You don't even need to look into his policies, which are equally.
I hope he doesn't run. I know there's a lot of Democrats, I think.
I hope he does. I hope he and Jasmine Crockett and AOC are in a battle royale. That'll be fun to watch.
I think he's just another because I don't think he'll win one because he's from California. The Democrats they should not run anyone from from Massachusetts, New York, Illinois, or California. If they want to win, they should run, find a charismatic centrist from a state like Georgia or Texas or Arizona, to run if they want to win. If they just want to run someone who they'd like to have win, then they're going to lose again.
Well, we'll see. It's going to be fun to watch. Right now, it's a party in disarray, and hopefully, Trump doesn't fumble and leave the door open on the midterms, that's going to be the Democrats' best option right now to unfortunately wrestle back gridlock and status quo, which is what they all want, or the vast majority.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, we're not going to agree on this, but I would prefer gridlock to the current. Like, I think there will be a trickle of good things that come out of this. Certain things, maybe, in the FDA, and certain things that maybe after they like. But I think for the most part, I would prefer, just for going on the record, I'd prefer the gridlock and status quo to this.
The 76 does not promote gridlock or status quo. That is the problem.
And well, as opposed to the current. So, and I understand.
Hey, we'll see. He just got started. Got started. We'll see.
I'm not going to claim that he was elected through fraud or something. This is what the people wanted. The people should get, what they wanted.
Yeah, let's see. He's an outsider. People should people who pay attention and who appreciate really the main driving force behind what we're doing here. They should at least respect and have some interest in seeing how this outsider, who on his first term was opposed by that scumbag Paul Ryan as the leader of the House, he slithered away. I hope we never see him again. What a worthless human being that guy is. Because he's a traitor. He's a traitor, is what he is. But Trump was opposed by both parties, and that should tell you that he's onto something. Onto something.
I think he's onto. I think, and I get that, and I understand why he got elected. That there's a lot of people who see him as giving an FU to the establishment, and I get that, and I've given the middle finger to the establishment, for most of my adult life. But I don't think his approach is not the answer. It's too authoritarian. It's not within the respects of making consensus. There's far too many executive orders. There's not a respect for the balance of powers. So I totally get why people voted for him. I get what he's trying to do, but I think you have to do it within the constraints of constitutional balance of powers type government for it to stick, because what we're going to get is probably, my prediction is, we're going to have the midterms. The Democrats are going to, take control. Then nothing's going to happen. And it's going to be time for payback. And then nothing's going to happen. And then,
this is why what we're doing is so important, Mike. It's why what we're doing is so important, because that's what they want. And we can't let them have it anymore. It's ruined our country, and it will continue to ruin our country. And again, remember, we all agree. 76% of us agree on healthcare policy. We agree on energy policy. We agree on gender. We agree on education. We agree on it all, and we're only at each other's throats because it's in their best interest to continue their self-interest to continue the status quo. So that's why we need to break it up.
All right, I'll give a teaser to my micro agreement number 3.
Yes.
And this is, that really, this goes back to what I was talking about structurally, that I think we're always going to be, my cynical view is structure will always be stuck in this bifurcated, state where nothing really changes, is unless we have proportional representation. If you have proportional representation where the wackies,
it's a long way down the road. I know it's,
but I'm just saying,
it's a total change in our existing system.
It is. But I believe, so this is my cynical, depressing, pessimistic view, is that that's what it actually takes to actually be able to form the consensus you need for meaningful, stable, change that actually is going to
I think it takes micro agreements. I think it takes our movement. I do.
It takes proportional representation and micro agreements, because if you have the micro agreements and you have proportional representation, you can actually build a consensus that everyone's like, okay, we all agree to this. Let's move forward. We don't have to argue. We don't have to relitigate this every time. We can have a imperfect.
We already agree. People just don't know. People just don't know.
So anyway, proportional representation, that's micro agreement number 3. It might take some,
noted.
The two-party system as it is going to be very structurally, when you got winner-take-all democracy, it makes it very hard to form a consensus and give credit to when the other side has a good idea or does something right. It's very hard to say, you know what, they were right about that. You know,
Yep.
you never see that. You never see like, hey, you know what, we were wrong, they were right. But if you have proportional, you can be like, yeah, we sided with this group here, we sided with this group here to get this done. This is a win-win. But you never see that. You never see like, oh yeah, that's actually worked out pretty well for us. It's always got to be.
This is Kublonia you're shaping.
This is Kublonia. Yes, from the. So with that, I'm going to close on that. If you got some closing statements, go ahead. I'm going to go get some dinner.
That's all I got. It's a good show. And thanks everybody for joining and listening.